Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome Alexandra Drane, the CEO of ARCHANGELS. Welcome, Alexandra.
I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we're happy to have you. This has been a long time coming, and it's just a real privilege and honor to welcome you and to share your remarkable story and the work that you guys are doing at ARCHANGELS and everything else that you're involved with. I want to start, though, with people who may not be familiar yet with ARCHANGELS. If you would share a little bit about what ARCHANGELS is and what the mission is.
I'm so glad that you asked, because Lance, you know I was going to get there anyway, regardless, as a shameless hustler. The easiest way to describe our passion, our relentless obsession, is we think that the 43% of adults across the US right now who are serving in the role of unpaid caregiver is probably one of the single most foundational elemental components of what it takes to survive as a nation, and certainly as a human. And the vast majority of these beautiful souls who are doing this work for no compensation, and they're doing it because they care, and often they have no option, and that's okay. They're all right with that. The vast majority of them don't know that they're in this role, and they have no idea how many resources exist to support them, many of them for free. So our platform is deceptively simple. All we want to do is find this population, particularly those who are the least likely to realize that they're in this role, love on them fiercely for it, get them validated in it, and then get them navigated over to resources that exist to help them right in that moment if they have time, and later if they don't.
Right. So you've been laser focused on this for about the last 8 years or so. Are you focused on unpaid caregiving because you have a personal story, or is there another reason behind it?
You know, Lance, you and I, we've talked about this in the beginning, and I'm so glad that we share this. I mean, everybody has a caregiving story, and that needs to be loved on and respected. That's the universality of this opportunity, which makes it so beautiful. And by the way, for anyone listening with a business intention, that's also a reason to take it very seriously, right? If you have customers that you're serving, people that you're working with, populations that you're looking to connect with, the vast majority of them are unpaid caregivers. They just don't realize it, or they will be eventually. That is not the way that our arc led us to ARCHANGELS. We are very data-driven. And it's funny, I was just thinking about this in preparation for a big meeting, that the way that we got to ARCHANGELS was a series of progressions, primarily of things that didn't go well. I think for most serial entrepreneurs, that's what happens. You just keep trying, And as we have continued to peel the onion of like, so what really is it? The third company that I started was fourth company, was a company called Eliza. And Eliza, over the course of the 15 years that I was part of it, we collected over 1 billion data points. Wow. And we had a gorgeous platform that was technologically enabled, but humanly powered, I would say, extraordinarily empathetic to the way that we interacted with people about their lives. And when we got started, we thought we were going to be wildly successful because we were going to use this outbound speech platform to connect with people about their chronic illness, their diabetes, their asthma, their cardiovascular disease, and that we were going to get to the folks who were not coming into the healthcare system, and using this beautiful platform, we were going to help them get their mammogram, get their diabetes screening, go take care of their heart health, whatever it might be. And what we realized over the course of those really first 5 to 6 years was the vast majority of people that we were connecting with, it's not that they didn't know they should take care of their health. It's not that they were uninformed or uneducated. They were wildly smart. They were just rightfully distracted by these other life events. And so eventually, in a very data-driven way, we wound ourselves around to saying maybe the biggest, diseases or conditions in our country are not the ones we traditionally think of. Maybe, in fact, it's caregiver stress, financial stress, relationship stress, and workplace stress. And that these, most foundational elements of what it is to live life, we need to, expand our definition of health to include them, because when life goes wrong, health goes wrong. And in parallel to that, on the night that I got hitched to my man, his sister was diagnosed with glioblastoma. And she died 7 months later in a textbook case of overtreatment. And so in parallel to those years of Eliza growing, we ended up launching a national campaign called Engage with Grace, which was all about how do we have this conversation about how to live your very best days until your last, way before you have to. And when we left Eliza, we looked at the overlap between those two things. And it was that unpaid caregiver, right? The only way to sustainably and scalably bend trend, the only way to stay solvent as a nation, solvent as corporations, and most importantly, alive as humans, is to respect and care for that unpaid caregiver who is responsible for the health and well-being of these people that they're caring for. And we thought, if you are an unpaid caregiver, you are really the epicenter of financial stress, relationship stress, and workplace stress. So that is the data-driven and heart-informed way that Archangels came to be.
And what is it about unpaid caregivers? We hear the numbers. We just had somebody on the other day, Alex, and they are focused on parental caregivers taking care of children. And they said the number is 16.8 million roughly. They're, the best data that they have for that. And then, the 56 to 60 million unpaid family caregivers. What is it about caregivers that you have found that just don't seem to get that attention and / resources support that, other people get in with other situations? Do you find that, or maybe I'm wrong? That's just our opinion and what we seem to see a lot of.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I think for a lot of people, numbers, you're a data-driven person. I'm a data-driven person. I'm certainly a data geek. I will not label you that, but in watching the things that you care about, I think you use that stuff, right? It matters. Things like 16 million, 60 million, 40 million, 100 million, those numbers don't often make sense to a lot of people. And so we try and do a couple things. One, we talk about percentages, and we also try and just reduce it down to the N of one, you as a human, and relate to that human. So the most recent data, Archangels data, that we, in collaboration with the COPE initiative, published with the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, so highly validated publication, said that as of COVID, 43% of adults, so if you're in a room of people, close to 1 in 2 of those who are around you are in this role of being an unpaid caregiver. And 70% of them have at least one mental health impact associated with it. So first of all, look around you. Unpaid caregivers are everywhere. And they're often the least likely to see themselves in this role, because that's not, unpaid caregivers, they're not focused on themselves. They're not sitting around thinking, woe is me. They're out there kicking butt, doing their best to do what they need to do to keep this person that they're caring for, or often multiple people that they're caring for, okay. And I think because they're not self-focused, they're less likely to be recognizing, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff out there that can help me. And so the point you make about not getting attention as it comes to resources, because this population is so expansive, because this role is so expansive, I think for a lot of people, it's sort of overwhelming. It's almost not compact enough for them historically to have focused on. And as of COVID, I think there were a lot of people who always cared and always recognized unpaid caregivers are huge. You did, right? You've cared about this for a long time. But I think there are others who are great, great souls. But until their workers started quitting, they couldn't start hiring. They couldn't figure out why their labor costs were out of control. Their health costs were out of control. They just didn't have the occasion, the opportunity to be like, oh my gosh, if I keep peeling the onion, it is the unpaid caregiver. Why can't I hire? Because these people have another job that they have to do called being an unpaid caregiver. Why can't I retain? Because if in your life, people that you're caring for get ill and your choice is, do I go to work or do I care for them? With an infrastructure that's gone away, you've got to go care for them. So I think the, never waste a good crisis or all the other sayings that people came up with, well, Winston Churchill did that one, really highlights why, as a nation, we're finally recognizing if we do not take care of this population, that in fact takes care of us. We are on an unsustainable path.
Right. Absolutely. And now at a high level, why don't you, and you kind of alluded to it somewhat, why don't you tell us why caregiving is something all of us should be paying attention to, and give us some more data if you have other data points? Because I just want to mention before I let you answer, one of the things I often say about the family caregiver or the unpaid caregiver, and I've shared this several times here on our show, my father came to live with my wife and I. We were newlyweds, didn't know he was going to need care. And he lived with us for about 2.5 years and needed 24-hour care. Never once, though, did I ever self-identify as a caregiver. I just figured, I'm a son, I'm helping my dad out. But, in hindsight, you can see, you were absolutely a caregiver in every sense of the word. And just, I think these families often, it's kind of the boiling frog analogy, they get in the water, it's a little warm, but eventually it's boiling, but they've been in it so long, they don't realize they're now at a boil. And we're going to get into that in a little while too, with this wonderful assessment tool that you guys have. But why should people care about caregiving?
There's so many answers to that, but just to boil it down, if 43% of adults are in that role, and 70% have a mental health impact. And we're now seeing across the nation the mental health crisis that we are in. Being an unpaid caregiver, mental health crisis, they sort of go one-to-one. The other thing I would point out, and you mentioned parental caregiving, when we look at it, sort of an example of a really serious manifestation of mental health impact, it's suicidal ideation. And if we take the country and we divide it into 4 different populations. And the first population is not doing any caregiving role at all. 4.5% as of COVID of that population has actively thought about suicide in the last 30 days. That's a very sobering baseline. If you are serving in that role of a parent or a guardian to one or multiples under 18, it doubles to 9%. If you're in that role and you're over 18, caring for one or multiples over 18, let me clarify that, it's 10%. Now, when people think about populations that are, easier to care for, or it's less stigmatized, although that wasn't true 20 years ago, being a parent or a guardian of a kid, for the most part, if your child is healthy, there are healthy things ahead. There are knowable trajectories ahead of care. You just describe for yourself, when you're caring for someone who's not necessarily a traditional child with no health conditions, anywhere else on that spectrum, and let's be clear, it's not just our elders, it's folks of all ages. The second someone gets into a health situation, it immediately becomes unpredictable. And one of the hardest things for humans to handle well is unpredictability. So literally the range of things that can happen and continue to happen, and your unknowingness of what's going to happen next. And can I show up at that wedding? Can I be there for that business meeting? Can I sign up for X, Y, or Z class or program? That's really hard in our mental health. Let's look back again at that 4th cohort. What if you are serving as an unpaid caregiver to someone or multiples under 18 at the same time that you're caring for one or multiples over 18? And remember, the percentage was 4.5, 9, 10. It actually freaking skyrockets to 52%. So 23% of adults are in that role. A full 1 in 4 individuals across our nation right now are caring for more than one person,
right,
at at under 18 and over 18. And more than half of them have actively thought about suicide. And if we come back to your question, which is, why is this something we should pay attention to? Number one, because that's not okay.
Right.
And number two, because sometimes the single most important way to start reducing that anxiety and those risks of suicidal ideation is to help somebody know that they're not alone. Now, think about those statistics I just gave you. Let me tell you guys, anyone who's listening, number one, you're likely, as Lance just said, to not think of yourself in this role. Number two, at least 43% of you are. And number three, it is impacting you. And if you're feeling as though you're overwhelmed and it's a lot, and maybe that's because you just can't handle life, we're going to give you a different interpretation of how you feel, which is you freaking rock.
Absolutely.
No, you're beautiful. You're amazing. You're caring for someone. And that's a lot. And that's why we use the word intensity. That's intense.
Alex, before I follow up with something here, I wanted to ask, now we've seen it with our company. COVID had really shined a spotlight on home care services because these families, as you know, they couldn't go into the nursing home, they couldn't go into the hospital, but if they retained our services, our staff were allowed to because they were deemed essential. But it also shone a spotlight on the fact that, you know, what these families were going through. And for a while, it kind of seemed like they were the heroes. Now we're slowly getting back to where things were pre-COVID in some sense of the word. It's almost like they're forgotten about again. Do you agree with that? Have you seen that? Or what was your experience during and post-COVID?
So, two thoughts for you. And are you meaning the gorgeous individuals who are going into the home to deliver the home care?
I'm speaking specifically to the families. It seemed like, you know, they were, you know, these family caregivers and, you know, quote unquote, the low person on the healthcare totem pole, the caregiver, which I think they're at the top of the totem pole. It seems like, you know, for a while they were just really elevated and, you know, applauded. And then we go back to kind of the way it was pre-COVID. Did you see that?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways. Number one, I think the population that we all stood outside at 7:00 at night and clapping for was the paid caregiver. Huh. It was the doctor, the nurse, the tech, right? The home care worker, thank goodness. And yeah, absolutely. And it didn't even last for more than 4 months into COVID that we all sort of, I don't think people got tired. I think people just got distracted by the extraordinary intensity of living through COVID in our country as an individual. Now, what's interesting is the humans who are on that front line, we refer to them as double duty caregivers. Those are the folks whose job is to be a paid caregiver, these beautiful home care workers who are coming into our house, going to work every day, you know, through the risks of COVID, taking those risks on, whether it's a healthcare worker or a postal worker or someone who's working in the supply chain. What we see is often being a double duty caregiver, because disproportionately the people who are frontline workers are also taking on these roles at home as unpaid caregivers. And we see that those double duty caregivers typically have double the intensity. Now, let me come back to that word and use that concept to answer your question about, is it getting any better? So we use the word intensity because, you know, a lot of people think of caregiver burden as a metric. We love that metric. I think it's an important one. If you are the unpaid caregiver and you're caring for somebody, you might not want to think of what your role is to them as, you know, they're a burden to you. I can guarantee the person that you're caring for would curl up in a little ball and cry if they thought you were a burden to you. And we all know, all of us, like I just coming off of 2 broken bones in my wrist and 2 broken bones in my leg, I was well aware of the burden I felt that I was. We use the word intensity because it encapsulates all the emotions, the intensity of love that I know my man and our kids and my family and my coworkers felt for me as I was going through this process, but the intensity of exhaustion and worry that they had as they were caring for me in a wheelchair going through this process. Intensity lets you feel those highs and lows, and it maintains the respect for everybody involved. So intensity is something that we measure. Before COVID, about 8% of adults in the US, over 18, 8% were in the red. If you're in the red, 90% of us have at least one mental health impact. In other words, if you're in the red, you're in the red in every way, shape, or form. So it's 8% before COVID. As of COVID, for about 20 months, it hung steady at 24%. So it tripled. Now, as COVID began, in some ways, by some definitions, to get less, depends on who you ask, people were like, oh, maybe intensity will come down. It's actually been the opposite. It's continued to climb. And when you think about all the things that go into being an unpaid caregiver, that infrastructure really matters. Is there a home care worker available to come into your house?
Right.
Well, if there aren't enough home care workers to go around, no. Did the daycare that you relied on close down? A lot of them did. Did the elder care place shut down? So what about inflation? If you're an unpaid caregiver, you're buying stuff for 2, maybe more, right?
Right.
As inflation has gone up on those core things like gas and food, that's hit unpaid caregivers harder. So we've actually seen intensity creep up to about, our last month was 31%. So in fact, the reality is this is not going anywhere. And the good news is that will hopefully kick people into more action to say, this is a population we got to care for because they're caring for all of us. And if they're not able to do that, we will not be able to go about our lives in these ways that we otherwise need to.
Absolutely. Do you think there's a sense of urgency from a national or a state or a local government standpoint? Because, we always say, if there was a mass shortage of doctors or nurses, it would be all hands on deck. But, we're such proponents of family caregivers and paid caregivers. And it just doesn't seem like that sense of urgency, and I'll say intensity, to use one of your words, is really there to help bring a brighter light on that issue.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, don't you wish I would just answer not a couple things? But I'm always like, oh my gosh, Lance. Yes. Okay. Number one, doctors and nurses, as you know, there is a huge shortage, certainly with nurses. Why? Because so many of them are also unpaid caregivers.
Right.
And if someone's put in the position of having to choose between, can I go into work because they want to, but there's no daycare, there's no elder care, right? Like they're going to have to do what they're going to have to do. So I think there is a tension now when you have a crisis, like we cannot fill the nursing positions. We cannot fill the tech positions that folks, big health systems are like, I got to figure out how to solve this problem. Well, one of the ways to solve the problem is you've got to help the people that you need to show up at work be able to show up at work. And if one of the reasons they can't is because they're an unpaid caregiver, then get them support in that, which people can and they are. I'll look at a state level and a national level, and I'll use the very recent 2 very big moves by HHS and CMS, Health and Human Services, and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services to do a couple things. One, President Biden issued the executive order around unpaid caregiving and basically said, this is something we got to focus on as a nation. I do work with on the advisory board of RAND. One could argue, and this is me speaking as Alex Drane individually, that if we are not supporting unpaid caregiving, it eventually will become an issue of national security. It is that foundational. If we can't field enough unpaid caregivers to care for folks to keep people going and the nation going, that's an issue.
Right.
So I do think the executive order from Biden on this was a huge reflection, and that was a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, of recognition on a national level of the urgency associated. And we also see things, I'll give as an example, the state of New York, Governor Hochul signed into place about a year ago, maybe, a executive order on a gubernatorial order to form a new master plan on aging. And a huge component of that is to look at unpaid caregivers and supporting unpaid caregivers. So I do think we are seeing in people's actions a sense of urgency. And for some people, it's because they know that that's the honorable thing to do for humanity. Right. And for others, I'm sure they feel that. But if they don't do that, they cannot continue to exist in whatever way, shape, or form they're being asked to do their job.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to, just to follow up on the intensity, you often use the analogy of drowning. Explain what that is and what that means, Alex.
I love you, Lance. So when I had babies, I now have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, but literally from the moment they were born, my mom started sending me every article she could find about drowning. Be careful of pools. Be careful of, she started with tubs, right? That as bodies of water grew bigger and our kids got more independent, she just kept reminding me that people have a notion in their head of what it looks like to drown. And what they think it looks like is someone's in the water and they start waving their arms around and be like, I'm drowning. The reality of drowning is that's actually doesn't usually look like that. What usually happens is the body, in an attempt to intelligently, yes, our bodies do, retain energy to stay alive as long as possible, your arms might go straight up or they might go straight down. You're conserving energy and you actually slip under the water. So lifeguards, and my son is now a lifeguard, they are trained not to look for the person screaming and yelling, although they'll deal with that too, but to look for the person who is quietly slipping under the water. And you talked about how most unpaid caregivers, yourself included, don't realize they're in this role. At least 50% have no idea they're in this role. I think it's actually way higher. And they're certainly not waving their arms around, yelling, I'm an unpaid caregiver, help, help, right? They're just doing what they got to do. They're surviving moment to moment. They're existing moment to moment. And often, think of those statistics that we shared, they're quietly slipping under the water. And so we think about it is our mandate is to be lifeguards and to ourselves be scanning the horizon constantly and looking for these souls who don't know they're in this role, or even if they do not realize that they are going under. And it is our job to throw that freaking life ring. And the other thing I'll say is, and please don't ask an unpaid caregiver, hey, how can I help you? Because you know what they're going to say. They're going to be like, I'm fine.
Right.
They wouldn't even know how to answer. It's overwhelming. And they don't think they need help. So just freaking help. Insert your body in their lives, bring them food, sit with whoever they're caring for so they can go for a walk, mow their lawn, do that weekly phone call for them. Whatever it is that you can do it. That's how you throw that life ring. And that's what we need to do to help people stay afloat.
I love that analogy, and I'm going to use that with your permission, because we had our friend Ian Creamer was on last week, and he said, I did not coin this phrase. He goes, but I use it all the time because of the families we encounter dealing with dementia and things. Oftentimes they go to the doctors and they get the diagnosis, and then that's all they get. And there's not getting any support for the family. They're not getting any support for their loved one with the diagnosis. He calls it diagnose and adios. And I'm like, that is so true, you know? So that brings us to Archangels, Alex. Explain everything, all the amazing things that Archangels does on the platform and just how it's helping people. And it's just incredibly needed and remarkable, the work you guys are doing. And we're big fans.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We're so grateful that you give a voice to this. Thank you. And I love Diagnose and Audio, so it's really, really smart. Does happen all the time. So the platform, again, I think the thing that's most foundational about it is helping people realize that they're in this role because they're not self-focused. And one of the other things that we've learned a lot is the term caregiver, or even unpaid caregiver, or family caregiver, or informal caregiver, makes a lot of sense if your job is to be in that world. If you're not, the words you use often include, I don't even know what that is. I am just a husband, a brother, a sister, a wife, a God-fearing person, a person who cares just because, a neighbor, a family man. I mean, the words people say are so beautiful as they tell you they're not a caregiver. And then they tell you how beautifully they are and preface it with the word just. Yeah. And again, when we think about that arc of how long it took us to keep peeling and peeling and peeling and getting to, we're going to start this frickin' movement and we're going to call it Archangels, is we think we have to move away from, or let me say it positively. We have to move toward not just destigmatizing, not just normalizing this role, but actually celebrating it. And we use the term Archangels with great intention. You're a freaking warrior angel. You were like spreading your wings out over these people that you care for. You're gorgeous. And the skills that you do and the majesty really that you bring to the work that you do, we need to celebrate. We need to see you, we need to support you. And it's not enough, even if we have these resources, which we know a lot of people do, to just have them and sit on them. We have to create these ecosystems that are so lush with caregiver recognition that people can't help but be seen. It's not for an unpaid caregiver to self-identify. It is for us to see them in this role, be like, you're a freaking archangel. We love you. We got your back. Let's get your score. Let's figure out what's driving your intensity. Let's figure out what's alleviating it. No, by the way, hey, we're an employer. We've invested all this money in all these resources and no one's using them. Come right on over. Or we're a city and we've done that. Or we're a state, because people have. These resources do exist, right? Or we're a faith-based community. Faith-based communities are extraordinary in the assets that they have to care for this population. It's about helping somebody get to them. And as importantly, just be like, oh, okay, what I'm doing is beautiful. Like, let me take a second. I don't have time to go for a run or meditate or eat healthfully. That's okay. No judgment. At least feel good about this gorgeous role that you're playing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about some of the resources that do exist to help families, because I know in my situation that I shared with you, my father was with us for about 2.5 years. I was actually pursuing medical school at the time, and not one person at the school or from the home health care that was coming to our house ever once offered a resource or any sort of sense of support. The typical, how's it going? How's your dad? That sort of thing. But nothing tangible that would make it easier on myself or even my wife at the time. Well, I mean, she's still my wife, but us at the time, you know what I mean? I don't want to get in trouble, but
I love you. Wife, I want to marry you again.
But, and I always reflect back on that. And Alex, that's what drives me. And that's really the catalyst for doing what I do, is because I want to try to help alleviate some of what I went through for a family that we encounter, or someone that might listen to our show or hear this interview or watch this interview with you. There's resources that I would almost guarantee they don't know are out there or have even been made available to them. So you're the queen of this. So I'm going to have you share these resources that are available.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Thank you. So number one, I gotta go back to that comment about your bride. We have so much data. If anyone wants to geek out with me on data, let's connect. One of them is the impact of being an unpaid caregiver, an archangel, on our relationships. And 52% of us who are in the red do not believe our primary relationship, is going to survive. The reality of being an unpaid, I do it to my man all the time. Right? Like, I am expending so much energy on my caregiving roles that by the time it's time for us to like snuggle in the bed and be romantic or, enjoy a calm conversation, I am so frazzled. I am at my limit. And it actually it can be very hard on relationships. And what happens is people, like, I do this, and Lance, you're way more balanced, so I'm sure you didn't. But we got to a place in my relationship where I was taking all that stress, all that intensity, the reaction to that intensity out on my honey. And I was actually sometimes even saying things like, I don't think our relationship is working. And I am so grateful for the work that I do. Similar to what you were just describing, you were in medical school, nobody was even talking about this, even though it's a clinical thing. I focus on this. I knew the data about the impact being an unpaid caregiver can have on your relationship. I know that if you are in the red, you bring that to everything that you do. But I was forgetting that meant my own life. I could tell you about that. I could tell a stranger on the street about that. And there was this pivotal night when I was going at my man. I was like, this isn't working. And, blah, 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 blah. And he stayed so calm and said, babe, I think you're in the red. And of course, in that moment, I was like, what? I'm not in the red. You're in the red. And then I, within a half an hour, I was like, oh my gosh, he's right. I'm in the red. And it was a pivotal moment in our relationship, because then we could both together say, when I have the freedom to be cranky, because in my unpaid caregiving role, I can't be cranky with these people I'm caring for. I love them. But unfortunately, if that person is not my man, I could. It gave us the language to say to each other, baby, I'm in the red. My kids, right? I'll say to them if they come to me like, Mom, help me with this homework assignment. I'll be like, you might not want that right now because I'm in the red. Or I might be like, I'm in the green. Bring it. Who wants to go have fun? I'm fun today. I'm fun, Alex. I'm in the green, Alex. So I do think the impact on relationships is something we have to start talking about because it's beautiful. Like we're in the red because we care and we need to celebrate that, be seen in it, and then help each other in these beautiful partnerships survive it because it can be intense on a relationship. In terms of the resources that exist, there are resources everywhere. Now, they might not be labeled caregiver resources, or even if they are labeled caregiver resources, but you don't know what that is because you don't think you're in that role, you're not going to use them.
Right.
So let's start with an employer. Employers have invested, as soon as they get to a reasonable size, and even small ones are doing their best to supply this type of support. They want their employees to be able to come to work happy, healthy, productive. And so they're investing in things to help make that possible. Might be childcare support, might be mental health support, it might be help navigating a health system, it might be help a wellness program, whatever that might be. So employers are investing money in things to help people feel okay and navigate the world around them so that they can be their best self at work. Those things are often, I would say, hidden under what's called an employee assistance program. So if you're listening to this or watching this and you are realizing that this is you, tomorrow, go to your head of HR and say, what resources do we have to support people who are caring for somebody? Do we have financial advising? Because unpaid caregivers often need help navigating the financial implications and intricacies and complexities of being an unpaid caregiver. Do we have help navigating a system for someone who's on Medicare? Do we have help finding childcare? Do we have help with telehealth? And most of those employers are going to say, absolutely, sit right down. Let me tell you all the things that we do. Cities also have those things. States also have those things. If you go to Archangel's website, you can click on your state, enter in your zip code, and it's going to take you to what your state has available. It'll be under all these complicated words. That's all right. Just put in your zip code and stop thinking about the language people are using to describe it and look at the services that are there. It will be things like a social worker. Social workers are extraordinary at knowing what exists in your local community to help with meals, care, transportation, all those things if you're an unpaid caregiver that can make the difference between you being able to show up at work or not, being able to show up at your kid's game or not, right? Being able to deliver the things that you need to or not. So in most cases, those resources exist. In most cases, they're underutilized. And in most cases, if you get to them, you will find that they can help with a lot, including respite. And the last thing I'll say about this is I think it's frustrating for unpaid caregivers when people say things like, Alex, you should just take a week off. And I'm like, yeah, sure. You should start meditating every day. Have you tried yoga? I know I can't swear on this. I want to be like, and say a lot of swears to that person. Like, with what time am I going to yoga? Right? So respite can mean getting somebody a Roomba. Like, here, this thing will vacuum your floor so you don't need to. We work with respite programs with the Exhale program, for example. I'll keep going back to the state of New York. That will help you get cameras, respectful cameras in the home of the person that you love, who's an elder who wants to stay at home, to make sure that they are not on the floor. Right? If I know that my elder is okay, then I can sleep at night. If I am not sure that they're okay, I can't sleep. So respite is way broader than let's get you, what people think respite is. Respite is practical, tactical, right now, give you the ability to survive this moment kind of stuff.
That's wonderful. Do you think it's working?
Do I think the work that Archangels is doing is working?
Yeah. Do you think the resources, that are out there, do you think it's working overall? I think obviously there's room for improvement, but again, kind of going pre and post COVID, that's kind of how I compare things right now. Do you think that these resources that are readily available now are having the impact that they're supposed to have?
Absolutely. If you can get someone to them, I'll go back to that respite example. In that particular case, this particular example is we were driving people to technologically enabled respite resources, and 70% who were in the red got out of the red.
Wow.
So it does work on an individual level. And I will also help people keep their jobs, which people want. Work is respite for unpaid caregivers. It's a place that they can go and have purpose and do what they believe in and make money, because making money matters to families. I would also say, if you roll it up, is it working for an employer in a top and bottom line way to support unpaid caregivers? It is. We have a particular partner, just as an example, and they are saving $4.5 million every month by finding and supporting this population of unpaid caregivers and helping them stay in this job. And I would also say, I think it's, people are beginning to recognize that a population of this size is a massive market.
Yeah.
Cater to them. You would like them to be loyal to you, support them in this gorgeous role of how they care for others.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the intensity, the red and the green. Tell us more about the Caregiver Intensity Index and kind of what it is and how it works.
Okay, let's do it. So what I'm going to do right now is show you two things. One, I'm going to give everybody a chance to, for themselves, get their own score. So if you're watching this right now in real time or delayed, go ahead and pull out your phone and take a snapshot of that QR code. And this is actually, we put together for the All Home Care Matters podcast. So this is one that, Lance, you guys will have access to. Keep it up. Hopefully we'll do other things together with each other on this topic, and this can stay alive. So the way that we work with a partner is they will put this QR code places. They might, or this link, they might send in an email. It might be in posters. It might be in social media postings. And when we work with a specific partner who has resources, the resources that we get them to will be specific to that employer, for example. Now, this particular link is not, because we're making this available to everybody. So I don't know what employer people have or what health plan people have. So take this snapshot, the QR code, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. And I'm going to get my score. And if you're listening, I'll describe to you what we're doing. And if you're watching, you can take it for yourself. So you ready, Lance?
Ready. I got my.
Do this thing. So I will have been navigated over to getting my score. However it was, it works on your phone. About 70% of people who get their score get it on their phone. And I'm going to click on what's my score. Am I caring for a relative or friend who is 18 years or older? Any care counts? We've discussed already. Oh my gosh, I am in multiple circumstances. I'm going to say yes. Am I caring for a child or a teenager under the age of 18? Oh my gosh, yes, I am. The situation with the person or people I provide care for can be unpredictable or unstable. That is incredibly true for me right now. Anytime I'm asked to go to a meeting, to travel, to speak, I have to caveat it with, I am in this role and it's pretty intense right now. I'm in the red, but we'll see if I'm in the red, and I might not be able to show up. So yes, I would strongly agree with that. I don't know what to expect, so it's hard to plan ahead. Very true for me right now. I strongly agree. I have had to cut down on my own expenses because I help pay for things for the person or people I care for. That's actually not true for me right now, because my honey and I are both working and we're able to stay in our jobs. That I am in a situation with somebody who recently lost their home because of the unpaid caregiver responsibilities, and we are doing our best to step in there. So yes, it is something that we are working with as a broader family cohort. Our family has disagreements about people not doing enough to help. On this one, I always joke, it says, scale of 1 to 5 equivalently. I wish there was a Googleplex. Oh my gosh, our family can go at it on this one. And by the way, the term family, my friends too, our broader community, this can be an issue. Disagreements about people not spending enough time for the person or people. Yeah, huge issue for me. Do I feel underprepared for most situations? It's funny. I mean, I should say I feel very prepared because I work in this space, but I don't. But I wouldn't say I feel underprepared. So I'll go neutral. Do I feel I should be doing more? I always feel I should be doing more. I don't know any caregiver who's like, yeah, I'm doing enough. I wouldn't say I have more to do as a caregiver than I can handle, but I wouldn't say I don't. And part of that is because I do feel supported by friends, neighbors, or family. That's incredibly important. We always say, if you're in the red, you need a red phone. You need that person you're going to call who's going to have your back, judgment-free, love on you, remind you, throw you that life raft, get you those resources, show up at your house. I've got that. So I'm very, very supported that way. I do have someone I can turn to for support when things are difficult. But am I confident in my ability to navigate the health insurance benefits? I've worked in healthcare for 30 years, Lance. I have no freaking idea. I can tell someone else how to do it. When it comes to me, clueless, right? Strongly disagree. Do I know how to manage the financial situation? I was a national spokesperson for Prudential, which is a financial services company. We did their ad campaign, right? But for me, nope. This situation I'm in right now, no idea. But do I feel I'm doing a good thing? Heck, freaking yes. I think I'm learning to cope with the situation. Am I confident in my ability to handle most things? I think I'm becoming more confident sometimes, so I'll go neutral. Has it limited my ability to spend time doing things I take pleasure in? It has. I do not have as much personal freedom as I would like. And some people do, and that's awesome, right? I am not depressed, but you and I opened our conversation together, Lance, with 70% of people in this role do feel anxiety, depression, and or suicidal ideation. I'm incredibly stressed out. I'm like hair fall out of my head, stressed out. I sometimes do feel manipulated in my situation. I absolutely sometimes resent everything that's going on. I am working full-time for pay. Definitely miss more work than normal. Sorry, team. I don't know if I would say I've been less productive because my job is this. So I'm very lucky, but I know for a lot of people that's true. If you're in the red, 50% of people who are in the red are less productive. But my employer gives me flexibility and they support me in my job. Click finish. Now, if I wanted to, I could make a profile so I could track my scores over time. No one else gets access to that data, but I'm going to say no thanks. Just bring me to my score. Calculating your score, doing nothing probably feels like a break. We're guessing you could use one, and I'm a 63. So I am in the red right now. And if I scroll down, my personality, my horoscope of being in the redness right now, we call me on fire. I'm an on fire caregiver. Immediately, I can go navigate over to get support, right? So right away, if I want, right now, check out these resources. You know your score. You know what's making everything feel more intense. Now let's see what we can do to help. These are those things. For me, the big drivers are no time for me, navigating money and benefits for others. But the stuff that's helping is someone in my corner and feeling supported at work. But I'm going to go back just in general and click on that, check out those resources. And this is the version that anyone can get access to, right? This is available for anybody. So we make it for anybody. I can click on my state. It's organized by state. If I'm a vet, thank you for your service. Anybody out there, current folks in the service or folks who are vets, you can click through on the resources available, beautiful resources available, or I can click through by driver, right? So not knowing what to expect, money, family disagreements, and I can click through on any of these family disagreements.
Alex, I think the drivers are so important. A lot of websites, they put up resources, but they never really go to the finite specific issues that you might be trying to address or that you're facing. And by putting that up there, I think it really adds an extra layer of support for these families.
Yeah. Lance, this has been a 30-year work in progress. And that's an example of something we just kept doing wrong. We would send people to like massive lists of things. When we're working really closely with a partner and the thing that someone needs help with is navigation, we will say, we can get you to a navigator right now, by phone, by text, by email, in person. And, anywhere from 20 to 40% of the time, the person will say right then, oh my gosh, please do. And the rest and then they're on the phone with a navigator, or they're chatting with a navigator, or they might say, can you send me that ability? I can't do it right now because my insert person with Alzheimer's is right next to me, but I'd like to do this tonight at 2 a.m. when I have a chance, or tomorrow at work when I have a chance. Right? Can you get this to me so I can do it then? So
what's the phone number, Alex?
Say it again.
What do you know the phone number?
So the numbers vary. Well, the first thing I would say, people, is if you really thank you to the government for the 866 number, which is, if someone's really having any kind of a mental health issue, that anyone can call that. By state, there are different phone numbers for your area to tell you, here's how you get home care, meals, right? You name it, all of those things that we just described. Or you can go to your employer site or your health plan site and go find the 800 numbers that they have. And most of them have a no wrong door policy. So they're going to get you on the phone and they're not going to hang up with you until they get you some support. So the numbers vary depending on where you are, or if you're calling in through an employer or a health plan or a health system.
Wonderful. And we're going to have all this on the screen for our viewers as well as in the show notes. I want to ask you, though, how often, because, being a caregiver, you could have a good day today and a bad day tomorrow, or have half a good and half a bad. How often should somebody check their score?
Most folks check it more frequently in the beginning because they're so relieved to know that, like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. They feel so validated. So we have people who might check it like every day for a little bit. And then people come to learn that when something in their life changes or how they feel changes, to go back and take it again.
Okay.
Because the drivers have often changed. If you went from helping someone with a chronic condition to that person was hospitalized and now they're getting discharged, it's a very different situation than a new diagnosis of cancer, for example. So people will often go back on their own. Most of the partners that we work with will send stuff out as a reminder, maybe once a month. But this also gets back to, what can we do for the people that we care for who are in these roles of unpaid caregiving? Send it to them. So when you see them going into the red, know that their own well-being is probably the last thing they're thinking about. So send them the intensity score. Be like, hey, dude, you're an archangel. I see you and I love you. Let's get your score. And then let's look together at your drivers, because I'm going to step in and I'm going to give you some support in those things.
Absolutely. What is your single most important piece of advice? I know the score is important, getting help, accepting help, asking for help. What would be your single most important piece of advice for somebody who maybe is just starting out on this journey, or maybe they're the one drowning right now?
Yeah. So of course I have 3. Like when I was growing up, I didn't get
top
cookies
5
growing up, but
yeah, absolutely.
I got to give you 3. So the first is give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. This is a beautiful role that you're playing and it's intense. So just love on yourself through it. That's not easy, but try. Number 2, put your air mask on first, your own air mask on. Genuinely, if you are not taking care of yourself, it will manifest physically. You will get ill. And I know you don't care about your health. You care about other people's health. If you're not healthy, then you can't do that job. So you need to put your own air mask on first. And then my third piece of advice is, and then once you're stable enough that you can, please be a lifeguard. Start scanning that horizon. Be ready to throw that life ring and insert yourself into someone's life. Make sure they get their score, use the language with them, show up at their house, send them food, just be their red phone. Whatever it is, tell them you see them, you love the work that they're doing, you respect the role that they're playing, and then be of service to them.
Great advice. Great advice. And I'm all about putting your air mask on first, because, we tell families if something happens to you, what's your backup for taking care of your loved one? So you have to take care of yourself first, but oftentimes they feel like they're being selfish or, negligent. It's like, no, that's actually very pro-caring for your loved one. It's the opposite of being selfish.
Yeah. Oh, exactly right. In fact, if you want to be selfish, then you better put on your own air mask. Because if you don't, these beautiful roles that you're playing, you won't be able to play them.
Absolutely.
So please do it for the reasons Lance said. And then if you can't do it for that reason, do it because the opposite is you will ultimately not be able to play this role you care about. So be selfish. Take care of yourself.
Selfish. Nothing wrong with being selfish in that situation. Last question for you today, Alex. I'm fond of asking guests this. if you and I, and we're hopefully going to be keeping in touch, we're friends now, and we're big supporters and admirers of you and all the work you're doing at Archangels. But let's say we didn't talk for the next 5 years and we ran into each other. What is different and what have you done in the next 5 years?
I think we've moved on. I believe that Archangels and all these other beautiful organizations and movements and humans that are working so hard to address this, I think this will no longer be a topic. Yeah. And that's my goal always, is like, let's put ourselves out of business. Let's move on to the next big thing. And I fully hope in 5 years, you and I are talking about whatever else we can then go focus on as an opportunity to help humanity. And that we will have gotten this straight, and we will be a nation that is number one in serving, recognizing, making visible this invisible backbone of our country.
Absolutely. And I would sum it up by saying everybody learns how to swim and you don't need a lifeguard.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That'd be wonderful. That's a great goal. And I think if anybody can do it, it'd be you.
Us together. Thank you. Really grateful for all you guys are doing and deeply appreciative of this time with you. Thank you.
Our pleasure, Alex. Well, Alexandra Drane, CEO of Archangels, thank you so much for your time today and these wonderful resources. Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Alexandra Drane, the CEO of Archangels, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.